Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Stephanie Graham. On July 7, 2007, Stephanie's parents woke up to find their 20-year-old daughter missing. She had gone for an evening walk with friends but didn't return home. The worried parents contacted all her friends, but no one knew Stephanie's whereabouts. They then reported her disappearance to the police. Stephanie Graham was born on February 9, 1987, in Phoenix City, Alabama, a small town with about 40,000 residents. Her parents, Kevin and Lisa Graham, were childhood friends who grew up and went to school together. After college, they got married. A year later, they welcomed their daughter Stephanie, followed by a son they named Wine. The Graham family was said to be very loving. Kevin worked in the construction business, while Lisa was an accountant. Their ventures were successful, making the family well off. Stephanie excelled in school, and her relatives described her as smart and kind. After graduating at 16, she enrolled in college to study accounting, aspiring to become an accountant like her mother and manage their family business's finances. Unfortunately, during her college years, she developed issues with alcohol and illegal substances. On July 6, 2007, a truck driver contacted the Russell County Sheriff's Office around midnight. He reported seeing a body on a dirt road near Antona, Alabama. When police arrived, they discovered the body was that of a young woman, approximately 20 years old. She had been shot 4 times in the back and twice in the back of the head. Without a purse, cell phone, or identification, her identity was difficult to establish. Police found several 9mm shell casings at the scene. The area was poorly lit, with no surveillance cameras or street lights. The police began investigating the murder. Initially, they suspected that the girl had been raped and then killed. The victim was identified by her fingerprints as 20-year-old Stephanie Graham. The police went to inform Stephanie's family about the tragedy. The news of Stephanie's murder devastated her parents, who had hoped for their daughter's safe return. Stephanie's parents told the police that she had no enemies, but during the conversation, they mentioned a violent ex-boyfriend named Larry, who had treated her poorly. Stephanie and Larry had dated for about a year until her parents persuaded her to break up with him. The family was convinced that Larry was involved, making him the main suspect. However, the police discovered that Larry was in prison at the time for assault. When they interrogated him, Larry stated that although they had broken up, they continued to communicate. He had even called her on the evening she disappeared, but her best friend Mimi answered the call. As a result, Larry was removed from the list of suspects. The police were interested in Stephanie's best friend, Nimi, who answered her phone. Larry recounted what Nimi told him. Stephanie and her new boyfriend were with them the night they went for a walk together. But then Stephanie left and forgot her phone. It turned out Stephanie had to appear in court the next day for a shooting in Columbus a year earlier. She was riding in a car with friends when someone opened fire. Stephanie was later arrested and charged along with others involved. It was later learned that Stephanie's father had to post $100,000 bail. At this time, the autopsy report was available, revealing that the cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds. It was determined that the girl had not been raped. There were no injuries or male biological fluids present. However, her underwear was pulled down, possibly to mislead the police. The police decided to question Glenn, Stephanie's new boyfriend. He said they were spending time together in the evenings and having fun when Stephanie suddenly mentioned she needed to meet a friend. They dropped her off at the nearest gas station, where they saw her get into a black pickup truck driven by a black man. Glenn said the driver may have been Kenny Walton, a family friend. The police were skeptical of Glenn's story, finding it strange that Stephanie was released so easily and not concerned that she would get into a stranger's car. However, due to the lack of evidence against him, he was released. The police began to investigate the family friend that Glenn had told them about. The police learned that Stephanie trusted Kenny deeply, considering him a second father. It turned out he had a previous conviction for distributing substances. The police summoned him for questioning on July 7th. Kenny appeared at the police station and denied any connection to Stephanie's murder. The police then showed Kenny photographs from the crime scene to observe his reaction. Kenny said that he could not look at these horrible photographs because he was very close to her. He said Stephanie was like a daughter to him. According to him, Stephanie called him around 10 p.m., asking to meet at a gas station to discuss an upcoming trial. She confessed she was scared about going to court despite her innocence and even asked for help with buying a car to leave the city and avoid court. Kenny refused to assist her with the car. He said Stephanie stayed behind when he left the gas station. It seemed unusual for Kenny, who viewed himself as a second father to the girl, to leave her alone at a gas station late at night. The police were skeptical of his story, so they reviewed the gas station CCTV footage. The footage showed Stephanie getting into the front passenger seat of a car, which then drove away. This revealed that Kenny had lied. The police called him back for further questioning and showed him the surveillance camera footage. Then he began to confess. Kenny told the police that they were near the city. While driving, Stephanie needed to use the restroom. They stopped, and she got out of the car, walked a short distance, and squatted down. At that moment, Kenny suddenly pointed a gun at her and shot her twice in the back of the head. After she fell, he approached her and shot her 4 more times in the back. This explains why her underwear had pulled down. However, that was not the most shocking part of the story. When the police questioned Kenny about his actions, he explained that Stephanie's mother, Lisa, had hired him and paid him to do it. He was in urgent need of money at the time. The police were shocked, as Lisa showed no signs of suspicion and appeared devastated by her daughter's murder. Kenny further claimed that the murder weapon was Lisa's 9mm pistol, which she had given him before the crime. Afterward, he returned the pistol to her. This led the police to obtain a warrant to search the Stephanie family's home. When they arrived, the family's father, Kevin, opened the door and seemed confused about the search. Lisa was not home. The police asked Kevin if all his firearms were accounted for. He confirmed they were and mentioned that his wife owned 2 9mm pistols. Kevin opened the gun cabinet without suspicion, finding only his own pistol inside. Lisa's pistol was later found elsewhere in the house and sent for ballistics testing. Lisa was then arrested. Initially, she denied any involvement in the incident, claiming that she loved her daughter dearly and would never harm her. However, under pressure, she eventually confessed. Lisa begged her husband not to post Stephanie's bail because she feared losing the $100,000. Lisa shared her thoughts with Kenny, and he reportedly joked that she should kill the girl. Lisa agreed. According to her, she did not think Kenny was serious. Ballistics results of the weapon showed that it was the same type of weapon used to shoot Stephanie. There was blood on the gun, but Lisa could not give an answer as to why her gun was in Kenny's hands. Lisa Graham was later arrested for murder. Stephanie's father, Kevin, was shocked to hear of Lisa's involvement in the murder. Kenny Walton pleaded guilty to the murder and was sentenced to life without parole on June 14, 2012. Lisa Graham's trial followed, during which she underwent a psychological evaluation. The results showed that Lisa, 77, exhibited signs of depression and borderline personality disorder. But she was still considered sane. The psychiatrist declared that Lisa understood the consequences of her actions. During the trial, Kenny testified against Lisa, claiming that she had asked him to kill Stephanie. He alleged that Lisa had repeatedly asked him to kill for various reasons. The neighbor also testified earlier, confirming that Lisa had offered him $5,000 to kill her daughter. Lisa never pleaded guilty at the temple and begged for mercy. In November 2015, Lisa Graham was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. She has repeatedly appealed her conviction over the years, but the sentence has remained in place. She remains in prison, awaiting trial, becoming the fifth woman in Alabama to face the death penalty. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Courtney Holden. Courtney Holden was born on February 28, 1992. When she was 2 years old, she was sent to an orphanage. Life there was not happy, not only for Courtney but for all the other children. Every day at the orphanage began with a prayer. Children of all ages prayed to the Almighty to give them a family and a happy life. Finally, Courtney's dream came true when she was adopted by the Holden family. Courtney arrived in Spokane at the age of 4 and began living in the Holden family home with Joshua and some other foster children. However, instead of finding a loving family as she had hoped, her life here was worse than at the orphanage. What Courtney experienced at the Holden home could only be described as a real nightmare. From a young age, she was forced to do all the housework. She had to clean the whole house and wash the dishes after every meal for the entire family. If she made a mistake, she was punished. Surprisingly, the Holden family treated the other foster children better. No one understood why they disliked her so much. Judy Holden was old when she adopted Courtney, and she was the last child they had received from the orphanage. Perhaps this explains their inexplicable cruelty and hatred towards Courtney. She was forbidden to go out without permission and was often abused. Visitors to the house often heard Judy and Joshua calling Courtney Cinderella, as if she were in a fairy tale, but in reality, she was more like a slave to her cruel stepmother and siblings. Courtney was very sensitive and had become accustomed to a difficult life with the Holden family. She feared her foster mother and felt terrified just seeing her brother Joshua. He did not allow her to communicate with her friends. She was not allowed to use a cell phone or other modern devices. She was only allowed to leave the house when necessary and always had to ask for permission. She only enjoyed fresh air and chatted with her neighbors when she was alone in the backyard. However, she became accustomed to this life and did not feel bitter. She still respected her adoptive parents because they were the only family she knew, and she had no concept of a normal family. Courtney experienced a period of freedom when Joshua, due to conflicts with their parents, moved in with his sister for an extended time. For Courtney, this was the happiest period of her life. She finally experienced the freedom she had always longed for, allowing her to go out, walk around, and meet friends. After finishing school, Courtney fell in love for the first time. Michael was an ideal partner. She felt the care and attention from him that she had never received from anyone else. Every time she met Michael, Courtney felt extremely happy. Their relationship lasted until 2011, when they had a son. Michael was eager for Courtney to move in with him to create a complete family. However, for unknown reasons, Courtney refused this offer. She continued to live in a Holden household, which she did not like, and ended her relationship with Michael. After the Holden family went through many changes, their home became deserted. The adopted children grew up and left, and John Holden, Courtney's adoptive father, was passed away. For a while, Courtney lived with her adoptive mother, Judy, and sometimes her son Joshua was allowed to visit with Judy's permission. Their life was quite peaceful when Joshua, Courtney's brother, was away. However, after their father died in 2014, Joshua returned and began causing trouble for the family. He installed many surveillance cameras around the house on Hero Avenue, near Rogers High School in Northeast Spokane. Signs that said, "Smile, you're being watched," were placed all over the yard, with cameras pointing in many directions. This made Courtney nervous because she knew that going out would get her in trouble with Joshua. Courtney's life once again became difficult and uncertain. Around 2015, Courtney revealed to a neighbor that she was again deprived of her right to use a cell phone, manage her social media accounts, communicate with people outside the family, drive, or leave the house without Joshua's permission. After Courtney gave birth, Joshua became so bitter that he forced her to cut off all contact with the baby's father. Courtney silently complied. The neighbor noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms. When asked, she frankly admitted that Joshua hit her. They were worried and did not understand why Courtney would endure such abuse. They tried to help her by reporting it to the police, but the Holden family always tried to suppress the matter. This was partly because Courtney never publicly admitted that she was being threatened by her brother. Eventually, Courtney was forbidden to talk to neighbors and was only allowed to go out at night. She silently complied. Courtney knew Joshua better than anyone. He was a large, overweight man with considerable strength and was often abusive. Friends of Joshua described him as paranoid, ruthless, and unpredictable. He had bragged in public about his ability to easily end a life and dispose of a body without difficulty. He had a notable criminal record. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but due to lack of evidence and the victim's unwillingness to cooperate with the police, he was released. He was also suspected of assaulting and sexually abusing a woman in 2003 when the perpetrator could not be identified. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and burglary. These incidents forced him to flee his parents' home for several years. After returning, Joshua became more violent. He kept complete control over Courtney. She largely cut off contact with her friends, saying she was afraid to go out for fear that Joshua would find out and make things worse. A friend kept in touch with Courtney every day on Facebook until Joshua found out. In her last message, nearly 2 years ago, Courtney said, "I have to go. Joshua is coming home soon." After that, her account has since been permanently deleted. Those who know the Holdens say the family's relationship is unusual. They are surprised that Courtney's child calls Judy mom and Joshua dad, while only calling his biological mother by her first name. This has led some to suspect that Joshua may be the child's biological father. Neighbors and acquaintances have criticized the Holdens' odd lifestyle and antisocial behavior, and have tried to stay away from the house. In August 2018, after an argument, Courtney tried to leave the house with a suitcase of belongings. Her mother, Judy, yelled at her to go home, but Courtney refused. Joshua forcibly took Courtney back into the house. Judy closed the door, and Courtney was unable to escape. This was the last time the neighbors, and perhaps anyone outside the family, saw Courtney. After that, she lived a life of isolation from the outside world. It took nearly 2 years for people to start worrying about her disappearance. In October 2019, Michael expressed concern about not seeing her for nearly 2 years. He wanted to see the child, so he reported Courtney missing to the police on October 24th. The police went to search Holden's house and were surprised to find Courtney was not there. Joshua and Judy refused to cooperate. Judy only allowed the police to look through Courtney's room and then told them to leave. A search dog was used but found nothing. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her child and run away. However, they could not explain who was withdrawing Courtney's Social Security benefits and using her electronic food stamps. On the day the police searched the house, Judy and Joshua withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Crime Information Center, saying she was safe and did not want to be searched. Police traced the call and found that the woman was Courtney's half-sister. Joshua and Judy later gave conflicting explanations for Courtney's disappearance. They said she ran away with a truck driver and then with a secret lover. Courtney's absence, along with the changing accounts of those who lived with her, made it clear that the Holdens were hiding something. In late October 2019, Joshua and Judy Holden abruptly left Spokane, leading detectives to suspect they were involved in Courtney's disappearance. They were found in Texas, at the home of one of Judy's adopted daughters. Authorities were able to charge them with withholding Courtney's welfare and identity theft, leading to their arrest in Texas. In early October, the Spokane Police Department wanted to check on Courtney's status. The case quickly became a missing persons investigation, which was assigned to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser. Courtney was officially declared missing. Alerts were sent to all states, and the media picked up the story, triggering a widespread search. When police and detectives went to check on her home, Joshua and Judy Holden have continued to refuse to cooperate with the investigation. Beside that, Randy told the vet he was worried Courtney might be dead and mentioned he was particularly concerned about Joshua's history of violence. Joshua had been charged with assault in the past, but the case was dismissed when the victim stopped cooperating with prosecutors. Investigators are now gathering DNA evidence and court records from that case, which show Joshua was also suspected in another attack in 2003. Neighbors and family described Joshua as mentally unstable, cruel, and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. One neighbor revealed that Joshua was unemployed and that Judy feared him. The neighbor said Joshua and Judy often bragged about how they had eluded the police. Joshua also claimed that killing and hiding a body was easy. Especially when you have kids, you can't just disappear, said Detective Randy. Courtney was also described in court records as a devoted mother who never abandoned her children. For more than 18 months, Courtney was confined to her home and was not allowed to leave. Joshua and Judy gave neighbors and relatives various excuses for her absence, from traveling with her truck driver boyfriend to running away with her fiancé. At one point, they said she was home but not available to receive visitors. When Randy visited their home in early October, Judy claimed that Courtney had just returned home a few days earlier and was taking a walk with her son. However, when asked for her phone number, Judy slammed the door. The police then forced her to let them in to check Courtney's room. According to Randy, Judy appeared very nervous about the situation. According to Randy's court records, the house was extremely messy with items piled everywhere, including on the kitchen counter. Courtney's room was also in disarray, with an empty mattress. Randy commented that it appeared that no one lived there. At one point, Judy panicked. When Randy asked to check the rest of the house for Courtney's child, Judy ordered the investigators to leave. Later that day, a neighbor informed Randy that they had seen Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leave in a truck, along with a child. Detective Randy also became suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. She received her last prescription in July 2017, although she had been taking her medication for months before she disappeared. Despite gaps in her medical records, money continued to be withdrawn from Courtney's bank account each month, and her EBT card was used to purchase groceries. Surveillance footage confirmed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. They was also caught on camera withdrawing the remaining money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing in early October. On October 24th, Joshua and Judy left the home. When police arrived to execute a search warrant, Randy noted that they discovered the DVR from the security camera system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were also missing. By mid-November, Joshua and Judy's cell phone numbers had been canceled. However, that same day, 2 new phone numbers with Texas area codes were activated on their accounts. About a month after the Holdens moved out, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was actually one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They said they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years and that Judy was retired. However, there were inconsistencies in their information. The man told the police that Joshua and Judy had a child, while Judy's daughter insisted that the child was Courtney's. In mid-December, Randy traveled to Texas to look for Joshua and Judy. Police found them at Judy's daughter's house, along with Courtney's son. Joshua and Judy Holden were arrested on multiple charges: identity theft, interference with child custody, unauthorized use of Courtney's bank account, and concealment of her child. The child was found safe and returned to his father. No other family members have been charged with any crime. Police searched Judy's home in Spokane with a search dog but found no trace of Courtney. A search of a home in Texas also turned up nothing. Police also searched a car and trailer belonging to Judy at an RV park in Oklahoma. Joshua, 40, and Judy, 74, are currently in custody in Texas and have refused to answer police questions. They also refused to be extradited to Spokane. With insufficient evidence to prove their involvement in Courtney's disappearance, it is likely that Joshua and Judy will be released. This is perhaps one of the most mysterious disappearances ever. "I have 4 notebooks full of different information," Randy said of the month-long investigation. Judy and Joshua continue to maintain that they had nothing to do with Courtney's disappearance, while police believe she is likely dead but have unfortunately not been able to prove it. Domestic violence experts point to a number of factors as to why cases like Courtney's are not always reported. One is the societal assumption that someone else will take care of it. According to Morgan Kern, Director of Counseling and Outreach at the YWCA, fear of retaliation can also be a factor. And people sometimes view it as a family issue, something to be dealt with at home. Although Judy and Joshua have been accused of multiple acts, they have not been charged directly in Courtney's disappearance. However, many still suspect they knew what happened. Joshua not only had a history of aggression but had also claimed to be capable of killing and hiding a body from the police. Investigators believe Courtney is dead, but no suspects have been arrested in the case. To summarize today's story, it is sad that Courtney was victimized by the Holden family. This young woman longed for a loving family but did not have the courage to defend herself. She believed that the people who abused and exploited her were still family. But does a real family need to make you defend yourself like that? Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Nathan Pete. Nathan Pete was born on February 12, 1982 in Tamining, Guam. Nathan was not only lucky to be born in a wonderful land, but also grew up in a large and loving family. He has 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, Eric, and a sister, Carmela. All of his siblings are very friendly and always ready to help their parents in everything. Nathan stands out from the others because he never causes trouble. At home, he is a thoughtful son, and at school, he is a diligent student. His outgoing personality helps Nathan make friends easily. He was always the center of attention and his name was often mentioned. Nathan grew up near the ocean and loved swimming since he was a child. Later, he was also passionate about surfing. He often spent all his free time on the beach, enjoying the sunshine and coastal life. While studying at South High School in Santa Rita, Nathan met Michelle, who would later become his wife. He was attracted to her from the first time they met. They began to spend a lot of time together and their feelings grew deeper. They were always together, studying, preparing for schoolwork and helping with housework. Their strong teenage friendship gradually turned into sweet love. When Michelle was 16, her family suffered a great loss when her mother passed away. Michelle spends all her time helping her older sister Melissa, the oldest in the Michelle family, take on the role of mother and manager of the family. Nathan has always supported Michelle and helped take care of the younger siblings. In 2000, after graduating, Nathan proposed to Michelle and she accepted. Because they could not afford a wedding, with the consent of their families, they decided to move in together and start a new life. Nathan found a job as a receptionist at a local hotel. His income was enough to cover his living expenses. However, like many other young people, Nathan and Michelle had their own ambitions. They planned to have their own house and independent life. After getting married, Nathan and Michelle welcomed their first son, Dion. Nathan decided to join the Air Force to improve their family's life because his income was not sufficient. After graduating, Nathan was assigned to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. Although Michelle had to stay home to take care of the children, the family had a stable income. Gradually, their dream became a reality. They built their own house and had a second daughter, Miara. Nathan's success in the military motivated both of them to strive for things they had never achieved before. Finally, after 6 years of being engaged, Michelle and Nathan had a big wedding. Eric shared, "My mother was extremely proud that her youngest son was the first in the family to have a successful career." In 2006, Nathan was transferred to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. There, he was promoted to the position of weapons loader for an A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft in one of the Essex squadrons. He also received additional training in logistics and material management. Nathan was passionate about his work and always tried his best. More importantly, he worked with the spirit of serving his country. One colleague described Nathan as a son of the country. In 2007, Nathan and his family moved to Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada, to take up a new job. There, he was assigned as a junior officer in charge of the supply department, serving the maintenance of fighter aircraft. Along with the development of his career, Nathan's family also grew. Soon after, the Peets welcomed 2 more sons, Drawn and David. Michelle loved life in Las Vegas and considered it an ideal place to live. To please his wife, Nathan decided to find the most suitable house for their large family, a spacious and airy house. The family's dream house was located about 30 to 40 minutes away from the military base. Nathan used his savings to pay for the down payment. Now, the most important thing was to manage the family's income and expenses reasonably. He might need to save more in the future. At least until Pete had a new business opportunity. Initially, Michelle was excited about the unexpected gift from her husband and started planning for their new life. However, over time, the cost of living increased. They spent more than Nathan's income, and the joy of the new house gradually faded. Everyone knows that financial difficulties can destroy the relationships of many couples, and Nathan and Michelle were no exception. Realizing the difficult situation of the family, in mid-2009, Nathan volunteered to join the Army when the United States was at war with Iraq. He was away for 6 months, and during this time, the family's financial situation improved significantly, which pleased Nathan. While Nathan was risking his life on the battlefield, Michelle was worried and scared about having to take care of 4 children alone. She was used to a stable life and could hardly imagine a different one. To dispel her worries, Michelle found a job at a telemarketing company for corporate credit cards. The job brought variety and new relationships to Michelle's life. She wanted financial independence and did not rule out the possibility of opening her own business in the future. Therefore, she actively developed herself by studying at beauty school. When Nathan was at home, everything went on as usual. However, when he was away, Michelle felt lonely. Having children and her husband's long business trips had cooled their relationship. Michelle longed for affection, so she had an affair with Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a handsome colleague. However, Michael was a cunning and dishonest man. He had been imprisoned in 2007 for forgery and attempted theft. Michelle could not resist Michael, whom she jokingly called Sweet Rudy, behind his back. At the end of 2009, Nathan returned home. Although it seemed that the distance and challenges had improved the family relationship, in reality, they had not. Michelle was living a double life. She did not want to lose her husband but was still infatuated with Michael. So she tried to please Nathan in every way. Nathan was fascinated by the changes in Michelle's appearance and personality. During his absence, the children had grown up, and their studies were negatively affected. Therefore, he decided to stay with the family for a long time. Because of his pure and loyal nature, Nathan did not think that Michelle's surprising changes could be related to her infidelity. In Las Vegas, Nathan sought to earn extra income by working the night shift for a higher salary in tutoring baseball to children. However, Michelle could no longer hide her dissatisfaction. As their living conditions deteriorated, her attitude became more negative. Over time, their relationship deteriorated beyond repair. On Thanksgiving 2010, Eric and his wife Veronica visited Day. For the first time, Eric noticed a clear tension between Nathan and Michelle. They had changed significantly, and a previous affection seemed to have disappeared. They could not hide their personal and financial difficulties, which were evident in the nearly empty pantry and refrigerator. A week later, on December 1, 2010, Michelle and Michael exchanged suspicious text messages. At 11:12 p.m., Michael texted Michelle, "Hope you're feeling better. Plans for tomorrow are almost complete." 2 minutes later, he texted again, "If you're not feeling well, let me know. I can give you more time. I appreciate your help." At 11:19 p.m., Michelle replied, "My husband just woke me up. He was getting ready to go out, but I thought he would be late today. I'm sorry this plan has caused you trouble." In the months before the tragedy, Michelle had been conflicted about her relationship with Nathan. She did not want to be with him anymore, but she did not want a divorce because she was worried about the financial and emotional consequences. Michelle thought that Nathan would not support her after the breakup, and that the alimony might not be enough to sustain her. In addition, Michelle knew about Nathan's military insurance. If he died, she would receive about $65,000. These thoughts made Michelle feel guilty and uneasy. One day, she shared these thoughts with Michael and was surprised when he showed interest in the matter. Michelle's initial idea about his ex-lover evolved into a more elaborate plan. Michael realized that the plan was too complicated for him and Michelle to carry out alone, so he recruited his friend Corey Alexis Hawkins. Corey, 33, was a mercenary with a criminal record for theft and fraud. With a criminal nature, he agreed to help but demanded a large reward, estimated at $20,000. After careful consideration, Michelle and Michael agreed to this condition. Later, their group was joined by 3 more people: Jessica Austin, 23, Corey's girlfriend, and her friends, Shannon. Shannon was promised 5% of the commission from Corey and Jessica for helping, and this large sum convinced her to join. The original plan was to shoot Nathan in his Chevrolet Tahoe, then drive the car containing the victim's body to an apartment complex parking lot. Jessica was responsible for purchasing essentials such as men's gloves, car covers, and perfume. Shannon would provide an alibi for Michael by confirming he was with her on the day of the murder, if necessary. On December 1, 2010, Michelle reported feeling unwell and came home early at 5:30 p.m., a departure from her usual routine due to her beauty school class finishing late. At around 10:40 p.m., Michelle arrived home, just 5 minutes before Nathan was due to leave for his night shift. Michelle found her husband asleep on the sofa. She woke him up and suggested they go upstairs together. He agreed. That was their last night together. Nathan was rushing downstairs because he was late for work. At the same time, Michelle and Michael were exchanging coded messages to avoid detection. Michael and his accomplice were sitting in a black Cadillac SRX, parked in front of the victim's house. They were wearing rubber gloves to avoid leaving any traces. Michael realizes that Nathan's military training could reduce the chances of his plan succeeding. So he decides to attack from behind. Michael pulls out a pistol and shoots Nathan 5 times in the back. Michael quickly drove out of the garage. At the same time, the criminals fled to a prepared location. There, they burned their clothes in the fireplace and destroyed the remaining evidence. Michael and Shannon then went to a hotel to create an alibi for themselves. Meanwhile, Jessica carefully cleaned up the apartment where they were staying. The police and emergency services were on the scene. They were shocked by the incident, as the Peak family's neighborhood was considered one of the safest and most exemplary. Detective Todd Williams began his investigation of the shooting scene by examining the garage. The garage door was unlocked. When he entered, he smelled a strong odor of iron. Blood was everywhere on the walls, in the car, and on the floor. Next to Nathan's uniform, the detective found his keys and wallet. Since the valuables were still intact, he ruled out the possibility of a robbery and murder. After examining the scene, Detective Laurie Anderson decided to interview his wife, Michelle. Michelle recounted the incident and revealed that the family was having financial difficulties. This information suggested several possibilities to the police. Nathan may have been hiding from his wife about his gambling addiction, debt, or infidelity. These theories could explain why Nathan was attacked. However, the available evidence suggested that Nathan may have been deliberately framed. Police checked his cell phone and found only photos of his wife and children, suggesting that Nathan was a good man. The investigation is ongoing. The next step is to investigate the surrounding neighborhood, as there are often witnesses or people who have heard something. As expected, several neighbors reported seeing a car parked near Nathan's house, driven by a man in a brown sweatshirt. The car left shortly after the gunshots were heard. This information gave detectives an important lead to continue their investigation. Nathan's family was shocked and they heard the news. They took the first flight out of Guam and were waiting for details. Nathan's mother, Carmelita Pete, cried the entire trip, unable to accept that her son had died so soon. When the family arrived at his house, Michelle hugged her mother-in-law and fainted. However, Nathan's mother sensed something was off about her daughter-in-law's reaction. She suspected that Michelle's fainting spell might be faked. Investigators decided to interview Michelle again. They asked her about the car that the witnesses had seen. Surprisingly, she revealed that her co-worker Michael Rodriguez also owned a similar car. Michelle's motive for sharing this information was still unclear. However, thanks to her information, the pieces of the case began to fit together. The police then concluded that either Michelle was lying or the perpetrator's plan was flawed. Investigators looked into Michael's background and discovered that he had a criminal record, which made them even more suspicious. When questioned, Michael remained calm and said that on the evening of Nathan's murder, around 9 p.m., he was shopping at the supermarket. There, he met a girl named Shannon. After chatting for a while, they decided to go to the hotel together at around 11 p.m. To verify Michael's story, the police contacted Shannon. She confirmed that the meeting was real. However, the detective felt that something was wrong, so he decided to check the information on Michelle's phone. Experts recovered text messages exchanged between Michelle and Michael over the past year. The content of their conversations was very suspicious. In particular, on the day Nathan was murdered, they discussed a contract with a man named Corey. This conversation seemed more like a form of encryption than a normal business negotiation. This made the detective suspect that this could be how the murder was planned. Investigators were almost certain that both Michelle and Michael were involved in the case, but due to a lack of conclusive evidence, they released Michael while the investigation continued. After examining Michelle's phone, they called her back for further questioning. Michelle appeared restless and seemed to be hiding something. Realizing that the police knew more than she had anticipated, she decided to reveal her affair with Michael. Michelle eventually confessed that a few months before her husband's death, she and Michael had planned to kill Nathan for insurance money. However, she claimed that she later regretted it and abandoned the idea. It appears that she changed her mind during the preparation of the crime. She felt guilty towards her husband and tried to interfere with the plan by turning off his alarm clock. Michelle believed that her accomplice would not wait or miss Nathan, but investigators did not trust her remorse. Her correspondence suggested otherwise. Furthermore, she sent Michael a smiley face emoji shortly after learning of her husband's death. Shannon later went to the police station to confess. She realized her predicament but attempted to downplay her role in the case. She explained that Michael had forced her to provide an alibi. Jessica had asked her for help, mentioning that her friends wanted to teach a big drug dealer a lesson. Shannon's job was to cover up the involvement of one of the attackers. According to her explanation, it was a way to seek justice. She added that Michael had disclosed the whole truth on the night of the attack. Shannon confirmed to the police that as soon as she realized she had been used, she went to report it. She also feared for her life, not knowing what they would do to her. Her testimony was confirmed by the hotel's security cameras. It was clear that Michael and Shannon arrived at the hotel at 11:40 p.m., not 11 p.m. as Michael had previously stated. Shannon's testimony led detectives to Corey and Jessica. But Corey denied any involvement in the crime. To honor the memory of young Sergeant Nathan, his family and friends held a memorial service on December 7, 2010, at the chapel at Nellis Base. Michelle decided not to attend the service, perhaps because she was not in the mood. Many of Nathan's teammates remembered his endurance and tenacity in the military. The squadron commander spoke of Nathan's outstanding achievements for his country and family. Everyone considered him a trusted teammate and noted his humility and dignity. Beside that, in a speech, Eric recalled, "My brother was always an example to the whole family. He loved life and was devoted to his wife and children. Everything Nathan did was for his country, his love, and his friends." On December 9th, Nathan's remains were returned to Guam. On December 15th, a requiem mass was held at St. Francis Church in Temining. Sergeant Nathan's funeral was solemnly conducted at the Pity City Cemetery on Guam. The funeral cortege consisted of 36 motorcycles. At the burial site, 6 officers carried the coffin draped with the American flag. Then, a 21-gun salute rang out. Nathan Pete was sent off as a hero. Michael Rodriguez, Corey Hawkins, and Jessica Austin were arrested without bail on December 8, 2010. Michelle Pete was also arrested the following day. Police were concerned about Michelle's mental state and placed her under surveillance to prevent her from committing suicide. On January 4, 2011, all 4 were arraigned in Clark County District Court. They were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, armed robbery, and murder with a firearm. Michael and Corey were also charged with possession of a firearm. The trial lasted 3 years. Several defendants denied any involvement in the case. With the support of strong legal teams, the defendants made several requests to exclude certain evidence from the case. However, the court denied all of these requests, and they were only able to delay the verdict by repeatedly postponing the trial. On September 21, 2015, the trial for the murder of Nathan Pete began. Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, the first suspect to stand trial, pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. On September 29, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michael's appeal was rejected. He showed no emotion upon hearing the verdict and displayed no remorse for his actions. A month later, Michelle Pete appeared in court in Las Vegas. She claimed that she had changed her mind about killing her husband. When allowed to speak, Michelle turned to the victim's parents with tears in her eyes, apologized, and said she loved Nathan and their children. She admitted she was confused and had made a big mistake, then fainted. However, the prosecutor did not believe that Michelle truly wanted to stop the plot to kill her husband. There was substantial evidence that Michelle was more involved in the case than she admitted. It was difficult to understand how a mother of 4 could commit such a heinous crime. The judge sided with the prosecution. Michelle pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a firearm to avoid the death penalty. The victim's family also requested that the death penalty not be imposed. The judge described Michelle's actions as incomprehensible. In October 2015, the third defendant, Corey Alexis Hawkins, also pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison and his application for parole was denied. The judge found Corey had participated in the planning and had been present at the scene of the shooting. Jessica Austin also reached a plea deal with prosecutors and was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. In March 2016, Michelle received her final sentence. She once again cited her emotional instability as the cause of her crime and asked Nathan's family for forgiveness. Carmelita Pete, Nathan's mother, was a very religious person, saw that her ex-daughter-in-law was truly remorseful and sorrowful for her actions. Carmelita believed Michelle needed forgiveness and therefore forgave her in court. She added that the most severe punishment Michelle had to endure was that her children did not want to see her anymore. They were afraid she would harm them like she had harmed their father. Eric Pete told Michelle that their family did not want revenge. It seemed that her mother-in-law's words had impacted her. The family would continue to live without her, and the children would grow up knowing their mother was a murderer. Eric's wife, Veronica, also wanted to speak. She expressed her hatred for Michelle and added that she had disgraced her family by pursuing greed and the love of a stranger. Michelle had destroyed her family. She killed the man she deeply loved, the man with whom she shared her life and built a future. Veronica asked if Michelle realized the consequences of her reckless ambition. It was hard to imagine. Such people always chase happiness without appreciating what they have. Nathan devoted his whole life to giving his all, unlike her. He often lacked sleep and took risks with his health and life. Thanks to that sacrifice, Nathan fulfilled his lover's dreams but never received recognition from her. The Pete children will carry lifelong psychological trauma. They will have difficulty building happy families and integrating into society. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Karina Vetrano. On Tuesday, August 2, 2016, Karina Vetrano met her father, Philip, after work. They had planned to spend time together as family gatherings had become increasingly rare due to everyone's busy schedules. Karina was juggling 2 jobs at the time. Philip picked her up and took her to his home, where they shared stories about their week. As Karina prepared to head home, she invited her father to join her for a jog, an activity they often did together. However, Philip declined, explaining that his back was hurting badly and he thought he might need a new prescription or that the change in weather was affecting him. He offered to call a cab for her instead. Karina turned down the offer because she was focused on training for an upcoming marathon and thought jogging would be helpful. Unbeknownst to her parents, this would be the last time they saw their daughter. At 5:45 p.m., she left her father's house to go for a jog. Starting at Spring Creek Park, a peaceful oasis surrounded by greenery in the heart of the city. Large parts of the park are inaccessible due to dense bush and swamps, so Karina's father, Philip, advised her to run her usual route to avoid strangers and unexplored paths. However, Karina's desire for solitude led her to disregard her father's advice. She wandered into a deserted, grassy area. Karina's tranquil moment was short-lived. A severe pain struck the back of her head, and she collapsed. This careless decision proved fatal for she. 2 hours had passed since they bid farewell to their youngest daughter, and she was nowhere to be found. The Phillip household became enveloped in anxiety and uncertainty. She should have returned home by now, or at least responded to her parents' calls, as she had promised to carry her cell phone with her. Karina's father sensed something was wrong and decided to seek help from his neighbor, who happened to be the chief of the New York City Police Department. Since they had a good relationship, the chief knew Phillip wouldn't contact him without a valid concern. After that, Karina was reported missing, and police launched a search for her, focusing on the park area and surrounding streets. Experienced canine units were brought in to aid in the search. It's well known that the first 24 hours after someone vanishes are the most critical and revealing. To maximize the chances of finding the missing person, law enforcement utilized every resource available. Meanwhile, Phillip, along with a group of volunteers, conducted his own search for his daughter. He thoroughly scoured the park, making phone calls as he searched. As dusk fell, Phillip spotted something in the grass and walked towards it. As he approached, he recognized Karina's phone and hoped she might have just misplaced it. However, as he cautiously made his way through the thicket towards the police officers, he stumbled upon something in the grass. He then stumbled upon the partially undressed body of a female corpse lying face down. Phillip turned the body over and was met with a devastating sight. It was the face of his daughter, Karina. A heart-wrenching scream burst from Phillip's chest as he realized the unthinkable. It turned out his daughter Karina hadn't lost her phone as he initially thought. The truth was far more devastating. Karina had lost her life. The police rushed to his side as he let out a desperate cry. They gently pulled him away from Karina's body, explaining that the area was now a crime scene and everything needed to be protected as evidence. The silence of the car ride home was oppressive, punctuated only by Mr. Phillip's tormented thoughts. He was consumed by the daunting task of breaking the news to his wife about their daughter's tragic passing. Memories of Karina's life flooded his mind. He remembered the day she was born, July 12, 1986, in Queens. From a young age, Phillip had been incredibly proud of his second daughter, Karina. She was a model child, obedient, well-mannered, and diligent in her studies. One of his fondest memories was taking the little girl to school for her first day. Karina's academic prowess had led her to earn a master's degree in speech pathology from St. John's University, a testament to her hard work and determination. Karina always wanted to help children, particularly those with autism. Additionally, she was a talented individual with a variety of interests, including traveling and writing. She was also an avid sports enthusiast, with a special fondness for running. Her and her father's similar passion for running brought them closer together. Phillip remembered how he had protected her from those who were courting her, not wanting anyone to hurt her. He hoped that one day she would find true love and build a strong family like his own, giving him and his wife wonderful grandkids. As Mr. Phillip approached his home, he felt the weight of his emotions. Taking a deep breath, he mustered the strength to put on a brave face. He knew his family needed him to be strong. His wife met him at the door and saw the pain in his face. She didn't need him to say a word, she immediately understood what was wrong. She rushed to his side, embracing him as she burst into tears. Karina's loved ones were understandably shocked and distraught when they learned about her sudden death. It was difficult for them to accept the brutal nature of the attack. The investigation revealed that Karina had put up a fierce struggle. Her clenched fists were proof that she had resisted her attacker until the very end. Injuries such as bruises and abrasions were found on her body, and her athletic clothes were torn. The autopsy revealed that Karina's death was ultimately caused by asphyxiation. However, Her skull had also suffered blunt force trauma, likely from being hit with a stone. A visible mark on her neck further confirmed the violent nature of the attack. The forensic examination supported the police's initial suspicions, indicating that the crime was both deeply personal and extremely brutal. Further evidence of the struggle was found under Karina's fingernails. Dirt and grass were found embedded under her nails, indicating she attempted to pull away from her attacker. Specialists also examined her mouth, discovering that several of her teeth were cracked and knocked out, indicating that she had bitten down in self-defense. Karina's neck showed multiple scratches, evidence of the intense struggle she went through. Her attacker's grip had been unrelenting, prompting Karina to grab at her attacker with all her might in an attempt to force them to let go. Karina's strong will to survive was evident in her fierce resistance, and she fought valiantly for her life. Following her tragic death, another disturbing discovery found in Howard Beach, Massachusetts, where Karina lived. A second jogger's body was found in a secluded area with dense foliage, causing concern that a serial offender may be at large. To investigate these similarities, geneticists compared DNA samples collected from both crime scenes. DNA samples were discovered on both victims. However, the DNA analysis yielded an unexpected result. The samples did not match, indicating they belonged to different suspects. Notably, one DNA sample was found under Karina's fingernails, on her back, and on her phone. Despite the small amount, investigators were able to successfully analyze the evidence. The DNA found at the crime scene was the only lead in the investigation, providing a way to identify the killer. Given that most murders are committed by someone known to the victim, the police couldn't rule out any possibilities. To explore this, Karina's father submitted his DNA for testing, as he was the first person to discover her body. Unfortunately, the testing was done on the same day as Karina's funeral. Karina's other relatives also underwent DNA testing, but no matches were found. Investigators then conducted interviews with Karina's relatives and friends to determine if she had any enemies. However, everyone they spoke to seemed to respect and love her. As a result, the investigators came up with a new theory. The crime was likely committed by someone who targeted Karina because of her physical appearance and was driven by impulsive desires. Feeling stuck, authorities turned to the public for assistance, offering a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to the killer's capture. The public responded in large numbers, with over 250 leads, 600 genetic tests, and more than 1,700 reports being compiled. However, despite the extensive effort, the investigation remained unresolved. One major challenge was the possibility that the perpetrator had no prior record of crime, making it even more difficult to identify and catch them. On August 31, 2016, a utility worker reported seeing a suspicious person near the scene of Karina's death. He told police that he saw a man emerge from the bushes in a restricted area of the park and run north. The New York Police Department created a sketch of the suspect based on his description. However, by December 2016, they acknowledged that this individual may have been an innocent bystander. The release of the sketch did not yield any new leads, and the investigation came to a standstill. The Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the case on December 4, 2016. According to the FBI, the perpetrator was likely familiar with the area, especially the park where the crime occurred. This suggested that the attacker may have lived nearby, which is why they thought it was an ideal location to commit the crime without being detected. As a result, the police were cautious not to show their emergence in the area, knowing the perpetrator might be avoiding them to avoid capture. To follow up on the investigation, the police also conducted screenings of local African American men who fit the suspect's description. However, this effort did not lead to any breakthroughs in the case. Detective John Russo, who was part of the investigation, recalled an important detail. He had noticed a young man in a hoodie frequently walking around the park. John even tried to follow him out of curiosity about his strange behavior. The young man moved slowly and paused for extended periods in front of houses near the park, as if he were looking for targets to rob. However, then John lost track of him. 2 months later, a store owner reported seeing a person who looked similar. This made John rethink his earlier observations. He re-examined the file of a teenager matching the description, whose name was Chanel Lewis. Detectives became interested in Chanel because of his strange behavior. They started asking questions to his friends and teachers to gather more information. It was discovered that Chanel had shown interest in harming the girls, which made investigators more suspicious of him. No other leads, officers decided to focus on Chanel. Chanel's life was unremarkable, mirroring that of many young African Americans in Brooklyn's low-income housing. He resided in a housing complex several miles from Spring Creek Park, where he lived with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. Chanel was unemployed, but despite being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he managed to graduate from a private school catering to students with emotional and behavioral challenges. Chanel's former classmates described him as a quiet and isolated individual who was frequently bullied and belittled by his peers. He had no close friends and was often ridiculed for his appearance and clothing choices. However, after being teased, Chanel would typically smirk and walk away, rather earning him the derogatory nickname African Lizard. Not everyone saw Chanel in a negative light, though. A classmate named Danielle remembered him as intelligent, with good grades, who would occasionally share amusing videos with her on the bus. Danielle never witnessed Chanel displaying cruel behavior. According to some sources, Chanel once claimed that he wanted to slit the throats of all the girls in high school. He then asked, "What if he bring a knife to school?" However, Dr. Edward Dana, the executive director of Lewis's school, asserted that Chanel never harmed anyone during that time, nor was he disciplined. Despite this, Chanel struggled with bullying during his teenage years, which left him traumatized. Nevertheless, he aspired to work in social services, driven by a desire to help people in distress. Whenever conflicts arose at home, he would often take long walks, frequently visiting a local park. Chanel had a few minor run-ins with the police. 2 incidents occurred in the Spring Creek area for ordinance violations, and another took place in May 2016 for urinating in public. In another incident, a store owner reported he for loitering with a crowbar, but responding officers released him after checking his ID and finding no prior incidents. The police kept this information on record. It was later discovered that during the time of Karina's death, Chanel was not at home. After an argument with his family, he had gone to the park. Upon his return, his appearance was disheveled, with torn clothing and visible bruises and abrasions. Chanel's mother inquired about what had happened, and he claimed he had been attacked. His account matched the timeline with a witness's description of a man fleeing the park. Additionally, on August 3, 2016, Chanel's father, a former school principal, took him to the hospital for treatment of severe wounds, most of which were cuts, and he also had an injured hand. The investigators reviewed the medical records from that day and found the story plausible. On February 4, 2017, Chanel was brought to the police station and voluntarily provided his DNA for analysis. Would a perpetrator willingly do this? Detectives wondered. The interrogation began on the morning of February 5. He admitted that he was indeed in the park around 5 p.m. on August 2, 2016, but clarified he was walking on dirt paths, not through the thickets, and listening to music. He confessed to encountering a young woman jogging with her phone in her hand. When asked by detectives if something happened when he encountered her, Chanel nodded and quietly said yes. Chanel's vague answers to investigators left everyone confused. He eventually said he was angry and that what happened happened. Investigators were skeptical of this confession, as it could raise questions for the jury at trial. They hoped Chanel would provide more details. Chanel explained that he had gone for a walk in the park to clear his mind after a family argument. Then he saw Karina walking alone and decided to follow her. He said that as she passed him, he grabbed her by the shoulders, wrestled her to the ground, and hit her in the face about 5 times to stop her from screaming. He said his punches knocked out some of her teeth and he injured her hand. Chanel noted that the struggle lasted about 5 minutes, during which she fought back violently, scratching and biting his. Chanel dragged her off the path into tall grass, where he tried to undress and assault her. Despite her shock, she continued to resist until Chanel strangled her. Then he realizing only afterward that she was no longer alive. When asked if he had known the victim before, he replied, he did not know her before this. It all happened by chance. The motive for his actions was even more surprising. He revealed that loud music from a neighborhood gang member had triggered his anger and uncontrollable aggression. Negative emotions were directed at the unfortunate woman, which seemed like a strange reason for the act. Investigators were no longer confused after obtaining DNA results that matched exactly. Microscopic traces found on Karina's body and phone belonged to Chanel. With this evidence, the police and prosecutor concluded that the case was ready for court. However, the motive still seemed unclear. It's possible that Chanel had seen Karina before, since he often visited the park and may have noticed her with her father. He might have developed an interest in her and tried to approach her, but after being rejected, he became angry and attacked her, resulted in a tragic incident. This explanation would make more sense. The trial against Chanel Lewis began on November 5, 2018. Despite his previous statements to the authorities, he pleaded not guilty, a claim supported by his family, who denied his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Chanel with murder and sexual assault, with potential penalties ranging from 25 years or life in prison. The debate about Chanel's guilt played out not only in the courtroom but also in the media. Chanel's defense team questioned whether the police followed proper procedures during his arrest, along with various news outlets alleging racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these claims as unfounded, stating that the investigation followed legal procedures. The prosecution provided solid evidence and DNA analysis results. In contrast, the defense argued that the evidence was inadequate and compromised due to the high number of people present at the crime scene, including the victim's father, who found her body. Forensic biologist Linda Rosano noted that the likelihood of the DNA matching someone other than Chanel was 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecutor also presented his phone records, which showed internet searches related to second chances and forgiveness in Catholicism, raising the question of what sin Chanel was trying to make amends for. Additionally, the release of Chanel's confession video led to more controversy, because his lawyer asserted that he confessed under great pressure from the police. They alleged that police may have fabricated evidence by starting the recording only after Chanel was coerced and that the search of his home did not follow proper procedures. The defense argued that the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death was mishandled at the start. As public pressure for the suspect's arrest grew, Chanel Lewis became the scapegoat. The jury took the defense's arguments seriously but still had difficulty reaching a verdict. This led the judge to declare a mistrial on November 21, 2018. A retrial was initially set for January 22, 2019, but was later rescheduled for March. After 5 hours of reconsideration, Chanel Lewis was found guilty of Karina Vetrano's murder and sentenced to life without parole on July 23, 2019. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a warm afternoon in Bond Beach, Florida, a man named Mohammed came to the police station to Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dalia DiPolito. On a warm afternoon in Palm Beach, Florida, a man named Mohammed came to the police station to report a disturbing incident. He said that a woman named Delilah had approached him and offered to hire him to kill someone. Although Mohammed did not provide Delilah's last name, the Palm Beach police considered the information credible and began an investigation. They had to establish Delilah's full identity and find the husband she wanted to kill. With this limited information, detectives began an investigation to clarify the case and prevent a possible murder. To gather more information, the detectives decided to use the witness Mohammed to arrange a meeting with Dalia. They chose the mobile gas station as the meeting location because, according to Mohammed, Delilah lived nearby. At the gas station, the detectives arranged several cars to monitor the meeting. Before Delilah arrived, they instructed Mohammed on what to say. They also attached a small recorder to Mohammed so they could listen in on his conversation with her. While monitoring the mobile gas station, the detectives unexpectedly witnessed a meeting between Mohammed and Delilah. Delilah's appearance made a strong impression on the detectives, as she did not resemble the usual image of someone who wanted to hire someone to kill her husband. Instead, Delilah wore a skirt and a tank top, looking very attractive. After the conversation, Delilah got into the car with Mohammed. At this point, Mohammed expressed his surprise, unable to believe that a woman like Delilah would lure him into a murder for hire. Mohammed asked Delilah if it was worth killing her husband. Delilah said yes, because she could not get a divorce. She was afraid that her husband would come after her if she tried to end the marriage. Delilah revealed her plan. After her husband was killed, she would go somewhere else, like Boca Raton, to create an alibi. Mohammed asked if anyone would suspect Delilah after her husband's death. She replied that no one would suspect her. The detectives were listening to a conversation between Mohammed and a woman. They were shocked to hear the woman calmly discussing hiring a hitman to kill her husband. This made the detectives shiver. As the conversation continued, Mohammed made specific moves on the woman. She showed Mohammed pictures of her husband so he could identify the target. The detectives were shocked by Delia's nonchalance about the consequences of her actions. She spoke so calmly that it sounded like she was discussing a normal business transaction, not planning a murder. However, detectives realized that they needed to gather more evidence to strengthen the case. She suggested to Mohammed that she would withdraw $1,000 in cash and pay him later. After concluding the conversation about hiring a hitman to kill her husband, she got back in her car and left the mobile gas station. Detectives followed her home to determine where she lived. Records showed that the address belonged to someone else named DiPolito, and police concluded that she had used a false name to hire a hitman to kill her husband, not Delilah as they had previously thought. Detectives ran a background check on the car Dalia used to go to the gas station to meet Mohammed. They found that the car's registration was held by Mike DiPolito, Dalia's husband. To their friends, Mike and Dalia appeared to be a happy couple in love. They met when Mike was feeling bored and looking for a way to entertain himself. He surfed the internet and found a website that offered escort services. Mike decided to book a meeting, not knowing that this decision would change his life forever. When Mike's escort, Dalia, arrives, he is immediately enchanted by her beauty. He finds her stunning and feels an attraction between them. They instantly connect and quickly fall into intimate conversation. Over the next few days, Mike and Dalia's relationship deepens. They meet again and spend a week together. They have a great time together, and they realize that their feelings have gone beyond friendship. From there, Mike and Dalia officially become a couple. After a few months of dating, Mike and Dalia's relationship takes a significant step forward. During a visit to a local jewelry store, they unexpectedly looking at engagement rings. This leads to a deep conversation about marriage, a topic they had discussed before. Fascinated by the idea of building a future together, Mike decides to buy a ring for Dahlia. It was not only a gift, but also a symbol of his commitment to the relationship. Even though their relationship was moving forward quickly, Mike was still extremely happy in love. He believed that this was the right move for both of their futures. Before meeting Dahlia, Mike had a criminal record in 2001. He was convicted of theft, fraud, and wire fraud in Broward County, Florida. At the time, Mike was addicted to drugs and needed money. The court sentenced Mike to 2 years in prison and 28 years of probation. This long probation period was to give Mike the opportunity to pay off his debts. When Mike first returned home from prison, he had trouble paying his debts. Determined to solve this problem, Mike took a job as a cook at a restaurant for $350 a week. However, this was not enough to pay off his large debt. Mike wanted to improve his financial situation to pay off all his debts and ensure that he did not have to go back to prison. Fortunately, a friend introduced Mike to a new job at an office near his home, just 4 blocks away. This gave Mike the opportunity to move from his job as a chef to the field of email marketing, opening up better financial prospects. When Mike and Dahlia began their relationship, Mike was honest about his difficult past and current restrictions. He explained that he could not freely travel between states without permission. Dahlia, with her strong passion for travel, expressed her desire to explore the world with Mike. Realizing that the financial burden was hindering their dreams, Dahlia proposed a bold solution. She was willing to give Mike $91,000 so that he could pay off the remaining debt. This money would help them get out of debt and start a new life, free to travel like Dahlia had always dreamed of. At that time, Dahlia was working as a real estate agent and making a lot of money. With her stable finances, she was able to help Mike pay off his debt and clear his criminal record. Mike consulted his lawyer about how to handle the situation. The lawyer advised him to prepare enough money to be released from probation. After discussing, Dahlia and Mike decided to transfer the money to Dahlia's Bank of America account because it was the safest and most convenient way. Mike's joy about paying off his debt and getting married was quickly shattered. One day, he received a text message from Dahlia informing him that she had transferred the money to his lawyer. Mike contacted the lawyer to confirm, but was surprised to be informed that they had not received any money from Dahlia. 2 days after the transaction, the lawyer still has not received the money. Mike contacts Dahlia, asking her for information about the money transfer and a receipt for verification. However, Dahlia suspects that the lawyer has misappropriated the money. She tells Mike that she will try to get the money back. Meanwhile, Mike hopes that they can resolve this misunderstanding smoothly. On the other hand, the Boone Beach Police Department enlists the help of Sergeant Whitey Jean, an undercover police officer. When he meets with the detective in charge of the case, Sergeant Jean is informed that Dahlia is trying to hire a hitman to kill her husband. The detective tells him that Dahlia is waiting for a call from the hitman and asks Sergeant Jean to pose as the hitman to arrange a meeting with Dahlia. Sergeant Whitey Jean agrees to participate in the investigation by posing as a hitman. In this role, he contacts Dahlia and asks her to pay $3,000 up front and the keys to her house. The request for the keys was part of a plan to make Dahlia believe that the murder would occur at her home. However, Dahlia felt uncomfortable with the request. She contacted Muhammad, who had introduced her to the hitman, to express her concerns. During a phone call between Muhammad and Dahlia, the detectives overheard and were concerned that they might have scared Dahlia. They feared that Dahlia might change her plans and find someone else to kill her husband. However, on August 3, 2009, Dahlia met with Sergeant Whitey Jean in the CVS parking lot. Sergeant Whitey was working undercover, posing as a hitman. However, Dahlia did not have any money with her. Sergeant Whitey informed Dahlia that if he waited until after the murder to be paid, she would have to pay him $7,000 in cash. Sergeant Whitey Jean announced the assassination plan on Wednesday morning, citing the cover-up as a response to looting in the area. He revealed to Dahlia that he would stage a fake break-in to give the act the appearance of legitimacy. Whitey Jean made it clear that he intended to pretend to break into the house, then shoot Mike twice in the head. Sergeant Whitey Jean informed Dahlia that he would wait a few days before contacting her again after the murder of her husband. He explained that the police would be watching her closely after such a serious crime. Sergeant Whitey Jean emphasized that this wait was necessary to avoid suspicion and to keep the case secret. During the conversation, he also gave Dahlia the opportunity to back out of the hit-for-hire plan. But Dahlia asserted that she was absolutely certain and determined to carry out the plan to kill her husband, Mike. She revealed to Sergeant Whitey Jean that Mike walked his dog at a fixed time every morning and left the house unlocked when he left. This information was key to the plan to kill Mike. Dahlia also said she would be at the gym at the time of the attack, ensuring that she would not be home when Sergeant Whitey arrived to carry out the plan. Sergeant Whitey Jean asked Dahlia to be at the gym by 6 a.m. He announced that he would be at Dahlia's house at 6:30 a.m. After finishing his conversation with Dahlia, Sergeant Whitey Jean was shocked by her cruelty. Although he had met many people in his work, he had never met anyone as cruel as Dahlia. The detective thought that creating a fake crime scene at Dahlia and Mike's house was important to see Dahlia's reaction. On the day of the attack, around 5:30 a.m., Dahlia told Mike that she was going to work out. Mike agreed but found it strange because Dahlia had never worked out so early. However, he did not think much of it and continued with his normal morning routine. The detective followed and confirmed that Dahlia had gone to the gym. This provided the evidence the detective needed to continue with his plan. However, before he could proceed with setting things up at Mike and Dahlia's house, the detective needed to inform Mike of the current situation. About 30 minutes after Dahlia left the house to go to the gym, there was a loud knock on the door. Mike rushed to open the door and was surprised to see a group of police officers standing in front of the house. He was shocked and confused and asked what was going on. A detective walked in and told Mike some shocking news. His wife had hired a hitman to kill him. However, the hitman was actually an undercover cop assigned to expose Dahlia's plot. The detective further explained that the whole situation was an elaborate plan set up to catch Dahlia in the act of hiring a hitman to kill her husband. Mike was shocked when the police came to his house and informed him that his wife, Dahlia, had hired a hitman to kill him. After calming down, the detectives emphasized the urgency of the situation and asked him to leave the house immediately. They quickly took Mike to the police station for safety. The detectives created a fake crime scene at Mike and Dahlia's house. They put up police tape and turned on the police car lights to make it look like a real crime scene. After they were ready, a detective called Dahlia and told her that the police were at her house and needed to talk to her about a matter involving her husband. The detective asked Dahlia to come home and answer some questions. After speaking with the detective, Dahlia returned home and was shocked to find that her house had become a crime scene. Police tapes surrounded the house and police cars were parked everywhere. When Dahlia asked the detective about the situation, she was informed that the police had received a report of a murder at her house, accompanied by gunshots. The detective then gave her the shocking news that a search of the house had turned up the body of her husband, Mike. This information shocked Dahlia. She burst into tears as soon as she heard the news of her husband's death. However, the detective, who was experienced in announcing the death, noticed that Dahlia's reaction was unusual. Although she appears to be crying, the detective does not see any tears on her face at the police station. The detective begins the investigation by asking Dahlia about the people who may have been involved in her husband's death. The detective's goal is to get Dahlia to admit that she hired someone to kill her husband. The detective tells Dahlia that her husband was shot twice in the head and died. Dahlia is confident that Mike will not open the door to strangers. She explains that Mike is currently on probation for securities fraud and is trying to complete his probation. However, this is difficult because the community is not supportive of Mike's upcoming release due to the amount of debt he owes. Despite this, Dahlia insists that their marriage is stable. During the investigation of Mike's husband's murder, the police interrogate her. Mike watches the interrogation from another room. The detective informs Dahlia that they have the facts of the case and will begin investigating. They then led Sergeant Whitey Jean into the room, handcuffed, and asked Dahlia if she knew him or had met him before. Dahlia firmly denied any connection to Sergeant Whitey Jean. After the police escorted Sergeant Whitey Jean out of the room, the detective informed Dahlia that she was under arrest for attempted murder. The detective further explained that the man Dahlia had hired to kill her husband was actually an undercover police officer. As a result, Dahlia was arrested for her crime. While Dahlia was in custody, the police allowed Mike, Dahlia's husband and the victim of the attempted murder, to see her. When Dahlia saw Mike, she tried to call him back, but Mike refused, saying that he could not help her in this situation. In fact, Mike wanted Dahlia to admit to plotting to kill him, but she still firmly denied her actions. On April 26, 2011, Dahlia DiPolito's trial was held in Palm Beach County District Court. Dahlia was charged with conspiring to hire someone to kill her husband, Mike. During the trial, Mike testified against his wife. He testified for 3 consecutive days. Dahlia's defense attorney argued that the plan to kill Mike was just a publicity stunt for a reality television show. They claimed that Mike had agreed to participate and helped orchestrate the plot. However, Mike denied all things. He claimed that he had no knowledge of or involvement in any such plan. Mike stated that he had no interest in participating in a reality television show and would never waste money or put himself in danger for that purpose. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for hours and ultimately found Dahlia guilty of solicitation of first-degree murder with a firearm. When the verdict was announced, Mike had mixed feelings. He was relieved that Dahlia was serving a 20-year prison sentence, a fair sentence for her serious crime. At the same time, he was relieved that he could finally move on with his life, knowing that justice had been served. After Dahlia was convicted of solicitation of first-degree murder with a firearm, her lawyers appealed. They argued that the jury's verdict had been influenced by an unofficial tip. Specifically, a juror had commented that Dahlia had tried to poison Mike's Starbucks drink. However, this information was never introduced into evidence at trial. By law, juries are only allowed to evaluate evidence that is formally presented in court. As a result, the Court of Appeals overturned Dahlia's conviction and decided that she was entitled to a new trial. Mike was surprised to learn that there would be a second trial for Dahlia, even though she had been convicted of conspiring to kill him. In December 2016, the state held a second trial, believing that they had enough evidence to prove that Dahlia had incited her husband to kill her. However, the outcome was not as expected when the jury could not reach a consensus. Ultimately, the judge decided to hold a new trial. Dahlia faced a third trial in June 2017. After the trial, it took the jury just 90 minutes to reach a final verdict. They found Dahlia guilty and sentenced her to 16 years in prison. In September 2019, Dahlia Dito asked the Florida Supreme Court to review her 2017 conviction. However, the court denied the request without comment. After Dahlia was convicted, her defense team attempted to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court for review. However, in February 2020, the court declined to take it. Despite this, Dahlia DiPolito's attorneys told the press that they were undeterred and were still determined to overturn the conviction. They revealed plans to petition a federal judge for a third review of Dahlia's trial on constitutional grounds. The attorney said this was Dahlia's last chance to secure a new trial. Despite serving her sentence, Dahlia was respected in prison for her strong faith. She organized a Bible study group in prison, which was praised by her fellow inmates. Before going to prison, Dahlia had a young son who visited her regularly. The boy is now living with his grandmother until Dahlia completes her sentence. According to her lawyer, the separation has been heartbreaking for Dahlia because she misses her son very much. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sherry Papini. Keith Papini and Sherry first met in junior high, when he was in 7th grade and she was in 8th grade. Their friendship quickly blossomed and they remained close throughout their teenage years. However, over time, they lost contact with each other and went separate ways. Sherry eventually moved on and married another man in 2006, but their marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. After her divorce, Sherry found herself single once again. Unbeknownst to her, a chance encounter with Keith was on the horizon, and their reunion would rekindle the spark they had long ago. This unexpected reunion revealed the growth and maturity that time apart had brought them. They discovered how much they had missed each other and decided to give their relationship a second chance. As they started dating, their connection grew stronger with each passing day. Within a year of reuniting, Keith and Sherry realized they were meant to be together. In 2009, they got married and had 2 children, and lived in Reading, California. To care for her children, Sherry left her job in telecommunications, and Keith continued working at Best Buy as a member of the Geek Squad. Keith and Sherry Papini had what seemed like the perfect life to those around them. However, their seemingly idyllic life took a drastic turn on November 2, 2016, when Keith returned home from work to find his wife, Sherry, missing. Normally, Sherry was at home when Keith arrived, but she was nowhere to be found this time. Keith initially thought Sherry might have gone for a walk, but as the minutes ticked by with no sign of her return, his concern grew. He decided to call their children's daycare center to see if Sherry had picked up the kids. To his surprise and concern, the school secretary told him that Sherry had not been there. Keith then decided to track Sherry's phone using the Find My iPhone app. The app showed that her phone was located at the end of their driveway. Keith immediately ran outside and began searching. To his dismay, he found Sherry's phone lying on the ground, along with her headphones. What's more, he discovered strands of hair tangled in the headphones. Distraught, Keith quickly contacted the Shasta County Sheriff's Office. The sheriff's office acted quickly and treated Sherry's disappearance as a serious matter from the very beginning, they bringing in the FBI to assist with the investigation. Keith is determined to find his wife and bring her home safely. To achieve this, he has asked for the public's assistance. Keith contacted the media to help spread the word about Sherry's disappearance, they sharing her story by covering every detail of her case. As a result, the public became deeply interested in Sherry's disappearance, largely due to her striking appearance and the seemingly ideal life she led. As the story gained media attention, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office started receiving numerous tips from the public. However, these information do not assist in finding Sherry. In their investigation, police examined Sherry's phone for clues. Upon reviewing the phone's contents, investigators found a heated text message exchange between Sherry and Keith from a few months earlier. This discovery raised suspicions about Keith's involvement in Sherry's disappearance. Despite these concerns, Keith cooperated with the police investigation and even volunteered to take a polygraph test to clear his name. The test results showed that Keith was telling the truth. Aside from the text message exchange between Keith and Sherry, investigators found several messages on Sherry's phone from men using fake female names. Further examination suggested that Sherry was preparing to leave Keith. On November 10, 2016, the police located one of these men and questioned him about Sherry's location. He reported meeting Sherry 5 years prior at a restaurant during a work event, although he claimed to have no knowledge of her whereabouts. He did offer some insight into her marriage to Keith. He shared that she had confided in him about her fear of her husband, Keith, due to his violent behavior. He claimed Keith often confined Sherry to their home. The police opened an investigation into Keith's behavior to verify these allegations. However, after questioning friends and neighbors, they found no concrete evidence supporting Keith's portrayal as a violent person. Friends of the couple shared a different perspective. They described Sherry as attention-seeking and has a tendency to overreact. This new information led the police to consider that Sherry might have exaggerated or fabricated about being abused by her husband. On Thanksgiving morning, just days after Sherry went missing, police received a call for help at 4:32 a.m. The caller reported a woman on the side of I-5 who seemed to need assistance. Officers quickly are present to the scene and found a woman bound by chains and zip ties. Due to her disheveled state, it took a moment for them to identify the woman as Sherry. The officers were relieved to find Sherry alive. They carefully removed her chains and zip ties to ensure her safety. After her release, the officers took Sherry to the hospital for medical attention. It was at the hospital that the full extent of Sherry's ordeal became clear. She had multiple bruises, her hair had been cut short, and she had a burn mark on her arm. Additionally, she had a severe rash and had lost a significant amount of weight, dropping to just 87 pounds. Sherry was interviewed at Woodland Memorial Hospital while recovering, but she was too distraught to share any details without her husband present. Her husband, Keith, was allowed to stay with her during the interview. According to Sherry, she was jogging when a dark-colored SUV approached. The vehicle was driven by 2 women. The older woman, who had a gun, got out of the car and approached Sherry, while the younger woman stayed in the vehicle. Sherry stated she was forced into the SUV. Before getting in, Sherry left her phone, headphones, and some of her hair behind in the driveway. She intentionally left clues for Keith in case anything went wrong. During the journey in the SUV, Sherry said she drifted in and out of sleep, making it difficult to keep track of time. The women also covered Sherry's face, preventing her from seeing the direction or location she was being taken. Sherry reported that her captors, 2 women, told her that she was taken because a man wanted to buy her. However, the women did not provide any information about the man's identity or his location. As a result, Sherry felt unease and fear, unsure of where she was being taken or what would happen to her during her captivity. During her testimony, Sherry also claimed to have experienced physical abuse from one of the captors. She alleged that this woman physically hit her many times, causing various injuries. She stated that she was branded on her right shoulder with the word Exodus, which would reportedly make her more appealing to her buyer. Sherry's captors played Mexican mariachi music constantly, of discomfort for Sherry. Throughout her captivity, Sherendra was confined to a small room with boarded-up window. Sherry described the basic but unsanitary and uncomfortable living conditions. In the closet, where she was chained, there was a bucket for her to use for both bowel movements and urination. Approximately 3 weeks after being in captivity, Sherry heard the sound of a gunshot. After that, she never saw the older Hispanic woman again. The other captor, who had been known to remain silent, now communicated more and ordered Sherry into a car, then driven along Interstate I-5. Car suddenly came to a stop, catching Sherry off guard. Startled, she looked around, and was then instructed by kidnapper to exit the vehicle. Sherry carefully got out of the car, feeling both frightened and hopeful. Was this her chance to escape, or was she being led into a more dangerous situation? Without any clear answers, she was left with deep uncertainty. After Sherry's rescue from the side of Interstate 5, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office held a press conference to announce her safe return. During the conference, authorities revealed that Sherry had been abducted by 2 Hispanic women. Unfortunately, this has sparked a wave of racism against Hispanics. In the aftermath of her abduction, Sherry began attending therapy sessions to cope with her ordeal. Fortunately, as a California resident, she became eligible for the Victims' Compensation Fund, which uses state budget to help pay for victims' therapy in the aftermath of the abduction. Sherry has changed her life, giving up her outgoing personality and limiting her social interactions. She now spends most of her time indoors, instead of participating in many of the social activities she once enjoyed. The police released a composite sketch of 2 Hispanic women suspected to be involved in Sherry's abduction about a year into the investigation. However, no new information or leads were received. The police also disclosed that they found male DNA on Sherry's underwear, the same one she was wearing when she was found on the side of the I-5. Authorities confirmed that the DNA did not belong to Sherry's husband, Keith. 2 years after her abduction, the police were still unable to find a match for the male DNA on Sherry's underwear. And the case remained unresolved. In 2020, a significant development took place in the investigation of Sherry's case. The police responsible for her case applied for approval to utilize a new technology called familial DNA analysis, which involves examining DNA profiles to pinpoint possible relatives of the person who contributed the DNA. Familial DNA testing is a crucial tool in solving crimes. It works by comparing DNA evidence to the DNA of known individuals, usually family members of a suspect, to see if there's a match. To aid in the investigation, researchers use genetic markers shared among relatives to narrow down the pool of suspects. In the Sherry Papini case, the police have found new clues when they matched male DNA found on her underwear to family member James Reyes, Sherry's ex-boyfriend. This unexpected result led to numerous questions and changed the direction of the investigation. As a result, the police began to suspect Sherry's ex-boyfriend of being involved in her abduction. To investigate further, the police collected a soda bottle from James's trash and sent it to the forensic lab for DNA analysis in June 2020. The lab then compared the DNA from the soda bottle to the DNA sample found on Sherry's underwear. 1 month later, the lab confirmed that James Reyes was a match to the DNA sample discovered on Sherry's panties the day she was found. The police interviewed James at his home in Costa Mesa, California, about the disappearance of his former girlfriend, Sherry. James stated that he had dated Sherry about 10 years ago and last saw her a year after their breakup. When asked if he was involved in her kidnapping, James initially denied any involvement. However, as the interview progressed, James revealed that he was still close friends with Sherry. He said he was involved in Sherry's disappearance but didn't kidnap her. Instead, he just helped her. According to James, Sherry had contacted him about escaping her abusive husband, Keith. To help her, James arranged for a car, which was rented by one of his friends on November 2, 2016. James used that vehicle to pick up Sherry the next day. Sherry stayed in the back seat of the car during the long drive to James' house in Costa Mesa, lying down the entire time. Once they arrived, Sherry isolated herself in the bedroom for the remainder of her stay. James continued with his daily routine, while Sherry occasionally helped out by cleaning and cooking. During her stay, Sherry started dieting to lose weight. She also asked James to help her harm herself on purpose. Her requests included creating bruises by hitting herself. Sherry asked James to hit her knee with a hockey puck. At first, James was hesitant, but he eventually agreed to her requests. Furthermore, James stated that Sherry asked him to brand the word Exodus onto her right shoulder using a wood-burning tool from Hobby Lobby. James admitted to complying with this request as well. Eventually, Sherry informed James that she had decided to leave his house. Before departing, she requested that James obtain chains and zip ties. Sherry then instructed James drove her back to Redding, California. During the drive, Sherry ordered James to pull over, and he complied. She immediately exited the vehicle, and James drove away. When questioned by the police, James claimed he had no knowledge of the incident Sherry described, involving two Hispanic women. However, when the police visited James's house, they were startled by what they found. The layout of several rooms matched the descriptions Sherry had provided, including James' bedroom and closet, which exactly matched a drawing Sherry had created for the police. Several days later, the police met with Sherry and Keith at the police station. During the interview, the police had evidence that suggested Sherry had faked her own kidnapping, and they were prepared to confront her about it. Before revealing the truth, they asked Sherry if she wanted her husband Keith to leave the room. However, Sherry remained silent. The police decided to leave Sherry and Keith alone for a few minutes. During this time, Sherry shared a secret with Keith. Sherry told her husband that she didn't want the police to find the Hispanic woman who kidnapped her because she felt grateful to the woman for letting her go. As a result, she had no intention of pressing charges against the woman. Keith listened to his wife's explanation but became concerned and scared as her words made no sense to him. He pointed out that even if Sherry chose not to press charges, the woman would still face consequences for her actions. The police then re-entered the room and shared a crucial piece of information. They had obtained a DNA match for the male DNA found on Sherry's clothing. That DNA belongs to James Reyes, his wife's ex-boyfriend. Then, the police informed Sherry and Keith that James had passed a polygraph test, suggesting James was telling the truth. The police believed that Sherry might have faked her abduction, and they claimed to have gathered evidence supporting James' version of what happened. According to the police, they also told Sherry that they had discovered information that suggested her weight loss during her disappearance was intentional. Additionally, they believed the rash on her arms could have been caused by the cleaning products she used at James's home. The investigation into Sherry's kidnapping progressed when police discovered that she had staged the incident. The police found evidence that James had indeed inflicted the injuries on Sherry, on her own accord, contradicting her claim that she hadn't seen him since their breakup years ago. Specifically, police claimed to have discovered that James had used a wooden object purchased from Hobby Lobby to brand Sherry. They also discovered that Sherry's broken nose was the result of self-inflicted injuries with a hockey stick. Despite this damning evidence, Sherry continued to deny any involvement in her disappearance. However, James provided the police with details about Sherry's disappearance that only someone with insider knowledge would know. Consequently, on March 3, 2022, Sherry was arrested by the FBI for lying to federal agents and faking her own abduction. 6 weeks later, she agreed to plead guilty to these charges as part of a plea deal with federal prosecutors. In the subsequent sentencing, Sherry's defense team requested a lenient sentence of 1 month in prison and 7 months of home detention. However, the prosecution recommended a more severe 18-month sentence. Ultimately, the court sentenced Sherry to 18 months in prison and ordered her to pay a $300,000 fine in September 2022, accepting the prosecution's recommendation. During her sentencing, the judge described she as manipulative and dishonest. At the sentencing hearing, Sherry apologized to those who had been affected by her actions and acknowledged her guilt. She took responsibility for her dishonesty and the harm it had caused to herself and others. Sherry was released from prison in August 2023 and placed in a halfway house. Her relationship with Keith ended on the day of her arrest in March 2022, when Keith learned the truth about her actions. Shortly after Sherry's guilty plea, Keith filed for divorce and sought full custody of their children. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shauna Nelson. Heather is a girl with a cheerful, sweet, and innocent personality. Her beauty was characterized by white skin, rosy lips, and dark hair, which captivated Ignacio, who affectionately called her his Snow White. When Ignacio asked her out on their first date, Heather was overjoyed. She eagerly shared the news with her roommates. Heather's friends were particularly thrilled for her, as she hadn't had much dating experience before, and they thought this could be the start of something special. Heather and Ignacio's bond grew stronger. Ignacio consistently showed his care and thoughtfulness by surprising Heather with her favorite flowers and coffee. His considerate nature made Heather feel loved and appreciated. After Ignacio graduated from the University of Northern Colorado, he decided to propose to Heather. She happily accepted his proposal. However, Heather made one condition clear: if Ignacio ever cheated on her, she would end their marriage immediately, regardless of any apologies or attempts to make amends. She would not tolerate infidelity in their relationship. After making her stance clear, Heather and Ignacio decided to get married within a year of their engagement. Their wedding was a beautiful and joyful celebration. Ignacio began working as a law enforcement officer at the Greeley, Colorado Police Department, while Heather worked as a supervisor at the local credit union. She quickly gained the admiration and respect of her colleagues and customers alike. They appreciated her exceptional ability to comfort credit union members during difficult times. A coworker described Heather as wonderful all the way around, reflecting her kind and caring nature. After 5 years of marriage, Heather and Ignacio welcomed their beautiful firstborn daughter, Victoria. Heather's world was filled with joy as she became a mother. Ignacio also proved to be an outstanding father. From the outside, their life seemed perfect. A picture of happiness and contentment. Heather's life took a big change in 1997 when her father suddenly passed away from a heart attack. Just a few days later, her mother received a devastating cancer diagnosis. Despite the immense grief, Heather remained committed to caring for her mother, selflessly dedicating herself to supporting she over the next several years until she passing in 2003. During this challenging period, Heather's husband, Ignacio, played a supportive role, caring for their daughter, Victoria, and helping with household responsibilities. However, as time passed, he began to develop an interest in a new woman, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the Greeley Police Department. Shauna was already married to Ken, a Weld County Sheriff's deputy, and they had 2 children. The couple's marriage, however, was struggling. Ken believed their relationship problems began when she returned to work after giving birth to their second child. Initially, the connection between she and Ignacio was friendly. But it soon evolved into a flirtatious exchange of comments, and playful banter marks the beginning of an extramarital affair. Shauna's compliments had a profound effect on Ignacio, captivating him and sparking a deep attraction. As they spent more time together, their initially friendly interactions developed into a deep love affair. Ignacio's feelings for Shauna continued to intensify, transforming from casual flirting to a passionate and intimate bond. Despite being married, they couldn't resist their strong attraction to each other. As Ignacio and Shauna's secret relationship became the subject of local gossip, Heather remained unaware of the affair. No one was willing to inform her, resulting in the relationship between Ignacio and Shauna growing stronger, while Heather remained in the dark. Shauna soon discovered she was pregnant and she shared the news with Ignacio, but his reaction surprised her. Instead of being overjoyed, Ignacio questioned the paternity of the baby, wondering if it was his or her husband Ken's child. Shauna told Ignacio that her husband had a vasectomy after their second child, so Ken cannot be the father of the child she is carrying in her belly. However, Ignacio, knowing that his wife Heather would be furious if she found out about Shauna's pregnancy, Ignacio became anxious. He didn't want the baby, and he desperately looked for a way out. Shauna agreed with Ignacio's plan, and he convinced her to have an abortion. He then drove her to the clinic for the procedure. Years passed, and Heather remained unaware of her husband's affair with Shauna. However, Shauna grew impatient and eventually decided to confront Heather. One day, Shauna and her friend Michelle Moore followed Heather to the grocery store, keeping a safe distance as they observed her. Heather, still unaware of their emergence, talked to a friend on the phone. Shauna eventually approached Heather and started yelling insults and accusations at her. Heather was deeply shaken after a disturbing encounter with Shauna at the grocery store. She recognized Shauna as her husband Ignacio's co-worker from the police department, whom she had met at several work Christmas parties. Heather asked Ignacio why Shauna, who had always been friendly to her, would suddenly lash out with hurtful words. Ignacio explained that Shauna had developed a crush on him, but assured Heather that she had nothing to worry about. Ignacio stepped in to address the issue, telling Shauna to leave Heather alone. He spoke to Shauna directly, but she became angry with him. However, Ignacio's intervention failed to stop Shauna's harassment, as she continued to bother Heather. Shauna once arrived unexpectedly at Heather and Ignacio's home, demanding to see Ignacio. Heather attempts to brush off the suspicion of an improper relationship between her husband and Shauna, his co-worker, but she can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. Unbeknownst to Heather, Shauna had confided in a colleague at the county dispatch center about her affair with Ignacio. Shauna claims to be deeply in love with Ignacio, saying she felt more strongly for him than for anyone else she had ever met. However, she also expressed her frustration that Heather stood in the way of their relationship. Shauna revealed to her supervisor that she would often visit the shooting range to manage her frustrations. While target shooting, Shauna would imagine that the targets were Heather. Meanwhile, Shauna's husband, Ken, remained unaware that his wife had been having an affair with Ignacio for years, until he discovered a diary detailing her relationship. Despite this, Ken chose to stay in the marriage for the sake of their children, rather than leaving Shauna after learning of her infidelity. Shauna was aware that she was not the only woman in Ignacio's life. He was having an affair with another woman, and this realization led Shauna to closely monitor his actions. Determined to be the only woman he was involved with, she threatened to tell Heather everything if he ever left her. As time passed, Shauna's fixation on Ignacio grew stronger. In an attempt to cement her place in his life, Shauna got a tattoo of his family name on her leg in July 2005. Her obsession, however, soon turned into an unhealthy fixation that led to her stalking him. Whenever Heather and Ignacio took their daughter, Victoria, out to a restaurant, Shauna and her family would coincidentally show up. Ignacio noticed the alarming shift in Shauna's behavior but chose to continue their illicit relationship despite his growing unease. When Shauna discovered she was pregnant with Ignacio's child for the second time, she immediately informed him she intended to keep the baby. Shauna gave birth to their son, Christian, in March 2006. However, due to Ignacio's wife being unaware of the situation, Ken proposed a solution. He would raise Christian as his own, provided Shauna remained his wife. Shauna agreed to the arrangement. In the summer of 2006, a woman approached Heather with unexpected news. Shauna Nelson had given birth to Ignacio's child. Heather was stunned and confused by this revelation. Upon returning home, Heather confronted her husband, Ignacio, about the child, seeking answers. Ignacio attempted to conceal his affair with Shauna, lying to his wife once again. Heather maintained her trust in Ignacio until one night in December 2006, when she woke up to find him gone. As she waited for his return, she became increasingly anxious. When Ignacio finally came back home, Heather confronted him immediately. Unlike his past responses, Ignacio chose to be honest this time. He confessed to spending the night with Shauna and revealed that the affair had been ongoing for years. He also shared that Shauna had been pregnant with his child twice and had recently given birth to their son. Following Ignacio's confession, Heather took the action she had previously threatened. She ended their relationship and asked him to leave the house. However, her deep-seated desire to keep her family together led her to reconsider and call Ignacio the next day. Despite her initial shock, anger, and skepticism, Heather's priority was keeping her family intact. She feared that ending the relationship would have a negative impact on their daughter Victoria, forcing her daughter to grow up in a household with divorced parents. Heather had a conversation with Ignacio about their feelings for each other. Heather lets him know that she still loves him, and she believes he does too. Heather wanted to save their marriage and made it clear that she did not plan to file for divorce. However, she also made it clear that she was not ready to immediately reconcile. Before considering reconciling, Heather presented Ignacio with several requirements. First, she asked him to take an STD test to ensure his health. Additionally, Heather also suggested that they attend counseling together to help them work through the difficulties of repairing the relationship and working through any issues that led to his affair. She asked Ignacio to relinquish his father rights to Shauna's baby, and she wanted him to end his relationship with Shauna altogether. Ignacio, determined to save his marriage, accepted all the conditions Heather set in order. He took responsibility for his wrongdoing and was willing to make things right. As part of the agreement, Ignacio called Shauna and ended their affair. Heather was present and listened to the entire conversation. Shortly after Ignacio hung up the phone, Heather received a text message on her cell phone. The message included a photo of Shauna and Ignacio's son, Christian, with the caption, "IGS flesh and blood," beneath it. Shauna was furious about the sudden end to her relationship with Ignacio, who chose to stay with Heather instead. Feeling betrayed and abandoned, her anger intensified. In response, Shauna began publicly talking about suing Ignacio for Christian's financial support in early 2007. Ignacio and Heather were working to repair their marriage after his infidelity. Despite their challenges, the couple was determined to move forward. However, Ignacio's former mistress, Shauna, continued to harass Heather, making reconciliation difficult. Shauna's behavior became more and more aggressive, prompting Ignacio and Heather to take action. To protect Heather's car from potential damage by Shauna, they started parking it in the garage. They also sought help from a lawyer, who sent Shauna a formal notice requiring her to stay away from Ignacio, Heather, and their daughter, Victoria. The notice clearly stated that Shauna was to stop harassing and intimidating the family but she ignored the warning. Instead, she persisted in sending Heather malicious messages via text, email, and voicemail to intimidate and provoke Heather. On January 23, 2007, at around 6 p.m., Heather was walking out of her workplace at the credit union. It was just after 6 p.m. As she walked out of the building with her co-workers into the dark parking lot, she was looking forward to a quiet night at home with her daughter. But her evening took a terrifying turn when a person dressed in black and wearing a Halloween mask approached the group, aiming a gun directly at Heather. The gunman appeared to be targeting Heather specifically, and as others in the group tried to seek cover, the gunman ordered Heather to kneel down and pointed the gun at her head. Right before pulling the trigger, the gunman expressed a personal vendetta, saying, "You ruined my life," and then shot Heather twice at close range. The gunshot wounds were fatal and inflicted in an execution-style manner. After shooting Heather, the gunman quickly escaped in a nearby red pickup truck. Meanwhile, Heather's co-workers and other witnesses immediately called 911 for help. Minutes later, paramedics arrived at the scene, but unfortunately, Heather did not make it. Due to the severity of the head injuries, Heather was pronounced dead at the scene. When police officers arrived at the crime scene, a parking lot, they were shocked to discover that the shooting victim was Heather, the wife of their co-worker Ignacio. Recognizing the victim, the officers immediately notified Ignacio and instructed him to go to the hospital. Upon arrival, Ignacio rushed through the hospital hallways to reach Heather's trauma room, but he was stopped by a doctor who delivered heart-wrenching news: Heather had passed away. The news was devastating for Ignacio, and he was now faced with the difficult task of informing their 9-year-old daughter, Victoria, about her mother's passing. As the investigation continued, witnesses at the crime scene shared their accounts of the events. One witness reported seeing the shooter suddenly appear and then flee in a red pickup truck, while another suggested that the shooter might have been a woman, based on their running style. Shauna Nelson has become the prime suspect in the investigation, linked to Heather's harassment. It was also mentioned that Shauna may have had a motive for the shooting, because she had an affair with Ignacio. The police officers at the crime scene were already familiar with Shauna and her husband, Ken, a police officer. What drew their attention was the fact that Ken owned a car similar to the one used by the shooter. As the evidence against Shauna grew, police sent out an alert to all units, focusing on Shauna and the red pickup truck she was driving. Ken was on duty that night and was driving patrol car when he received a radio alert about his wife and vehicle. He quickly began looking for his wife. 20 minutes later, he found her driving his vehicle close to their home. She explained that she had been out running errands, but he became suspicious when he noticed that she wasn't wearing shoes, which seemed unusual considering it was January in Colorado. It will be very cold. What further raised Ken's suspicions was that Shauna was wearing his clothing, including his socks, underwear, and pants. After stopping Shauna, he called for assistance and the police soon arrived to take her into custody. The authorities then launched an investigation to determine if Shauna had any involvement in Heather's murder. Investigators made several key proof in their investigation. They found a pair of shoes with Shauna's DNA near the crime scene, less than 1,000 feet away. In the parking lot where Heather was shot, they recovered 2 shell casings from a .40 caliber Glock Model 22, the same type of gun used by Ken for his job. This new evidence strengthened the case against Shauna. The investigation also turned up a Halloween mask hidden under the seat of Ken's red pickup truck. The mask closely resembled the one worn by the suspect in the shooting of Heather. At Shauna's home, investigators found a bathtub filled and ready for use, suggesting that Shauna may have planned to wash off any blood after the crime. After Shauna's arrest, her clothing and hands were tested for gunshot residue. The results were positive, showing that she had recently been around a gun. With this new evidence, Shauna was eventually charged with first-degree murder. Despite matching shell casings from the murder weapon, the actual gun used to kill Heather was never recovered. The reason for this was partly due to the actions of Ken, who stopped Shauna after the murder but failed to detain her. As a result, Ken was charged with destruction of evidence and abetting first-degree murder. During her police interrogation, Shauna provided an alibi for her whereabouts at the time of the murder. She explained that she had put on some of her husband's dirty clothes from the laundry basket, which is why she was wearing them. Shauna claimed she went to the store, realized she forgot her wallet, and then drove back home. However, when questioned about Heather's murder, Shauna denied any involvement or knowledge of the crime. Ignacio was also questioned by the police but was eventually cleared of suspicion in February 2008. Shauna's trial for the murder of Heather began, with Shauna pleading not guilty to the charges. The prosecution argued that Shauna's fixation with Ignacio, a married police officer, was the primary motivation behind her murder of Heather, and that this was not Shauna's first affair with a married officer. The state negotiated a deal with Michelle Moore, a key witness and Shauna's former best friend. Michelle often accompanied Shauna when she would intimidate and harass Heather. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Michelle agreed to testify against Shauna. During her testimony, Michelle made it clear how much Shauna disliked Heather and even confessed that she helped plan the murder. In contrast, Shauna took the stand in her own defense, strongly denying all allegations against her. Shauna specifically denied having conversations about her fantasies of killing Heather or picturing Heather in her mind during target practice with others. She also claimed to have had no involvement in the killing itself, stating she was on her way to a liquor store at the time of the shooting. As part of her defense, Shauna proposed an alternative explanation for Heather's murder. She suggested that Michelle might have killed Heather to make her happy. However, when Michelle was questioned further, she dismissed Shauna's claims. The prosecution alleged that Shauna dressed in her husband's clothes during the shooting to frame him for the crime. The state claimed that by killing Heather, Shauna and Ignacio would be able to start a new life together. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Shauna guilty of first-degree murder. The judge addressed Shauna, stating that she deserved the sentence she received. Shauna's former friend, Michelle, was sentenced to 9 years in prison for her role in planning Heather's murder. Following Shauna's conviction, her husband Ken resigned from the police department, filed for divorce, and moved out of state with their children. However, he eventually returned to Colorado and expressed hope that their children would one day visit Shauna in prison. Despite the circumstances, Ken believed that Shauna was a caring and wonderful mother. Heather's family is relieved Shauna is in custody and they feel justice has been served. Her loved ones hope Shauna will spend the rest of her life reflecting on the suffering she caused Heather. Shauna's actions had dire consequences. She separated Heather from her loved ones, ultimately depriving the love, care, and nurturing that a mother would give to her daughter, Victoria. Unfortunately, when Victoria, 17 years old, she died in a car accident in 2015. Her vehicle crashed into a tree after she lost control, resulting in her untimely death.